How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be going a different direction with my video today. I've had a lot of people lately interested in why I wear the colors and how I correlate them to the different planets of the days, how I use a meditative practice to draw off the angstrom in which the color on the spectrum exists through meditation. So I titled today's video Saturn, Color, Consciousness, and Sacred Correspondence. Today I want to present a synthesis of physics, contemplative practice, religious symbolism, and Western esoteric tradition through the lens of Saturn, with particular attention to the names Agiel and Zazel, the intelligence and the spirit of Saturn. The color language of purple and black, and the idea that disciplined attention may function as a bridge between symbolic meaning, spiritual devotion, and altered inner states. My purpose is not to collapse science into mysticism or mysticism into science, but to show how these domains can be placed in a meaningful dialogue without confusing metaphor for measurement. Saturn in astronomy is the sixth planet from the Sun. It's a gas giant composed primarily of hydrogen and helium, and distinguished by its intricate ring systems. In religion and mythology, however, Saturn has long carried meaning that exceeded the physical planet itself. In Roman tradition, Saturn is associated with sowing, agriculture, time, storage, discipline, and harvest. In Greek thought, this current overlaps with Cronus, and in other spiritual frameworks, similar Saturnine functions appear in deities and powers linked to limitation, structure, fate, justice, endurance, and karmic reckoning. The enduring appeal of Saturn lies in this dual role. It is at once the emblem of restriction and the custodian of maturity, the forces that closes doors and the force that also prepares the worthy for lasting increase. Within Renaissance occult philosophy, especially in the current associated with Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, Saturn is not treated merely as a planet but a layered intelligence within a symbolic universe. In that system, Agiel is identified as the intelligence of Saturn, while Zazel is identified as the spirit of Saturn. The distinction is important because the intelligence is traditionally understood as the more ordered, refined, and governing aspect of the planetary current, while the spirit is treated as the denser, more immediate, and more operational force through which the current manifests into your reality. In simpler terms, Agiel may be approached as the structuring mind of Saturn and Zazel as its rawer and more severe activity. One could say that Agiel governs the architecture of Saturnine wisdom, while Zazel governs its pressure, ordeal, and embodiment. Historically, Saturn in these older traditions is more often assigned darker tones, leaden hues, and blue rather than purple. Yet purple and black, which is my personal preference, remain symbolically fitting for a contemporary contemplative treatment of Saturn because they capture two different aspects of the same archetype. Purple as a color of sovereignty, depth, hidden authority, and transmutation, and black is the color of boundary, absorption, stillness, secrecy, and the unknown, which could also be linked to the abyss. If we're going to speak reasonably about color, though, however, we must distinguish symbolic use from physical optics. Violet is a spectral color visible in visible light with wavelengths roughly between 380 and 450 nanometers, or approximately 3,800 to 4,500 angstroms. Black, by contrast, is not a wavelength at all, but the perceptual result of the absence or absorption of visible light itself. Purple is also not a single spectral wavelength in the same way violet is. Purple is perceived as a perceptual composite created by the brain when red and blue violet, sorry guys, I'm like getting tongue-tied over here, information are combined in visual processing, with red and blue representing duality as a precursor to the violet energies into purple itself. Therefore, if one speaks of channeling the angstrom of purple, which I often reference when I tell people that I use colors to correlate planetary and celestial energies, and I draw off of those frequencies through their angstrom itself with my own quantum lattice communications channel, I'll get to that later. That phrase is not scientifically precise. A more careful formulation would be that one uses violet as a spectral analog. Purple is a symbolic perceptual field, and black is an absorptive or null condition that shifts attention inward by reducing sensory complexity. This matters because the scientific credibility of the presentation depends on clarity, and clarity is exactly what I'm trying to project here when I'm talking about why I do the things that I do. This is how I do the things that I do, because I like to live my life very structured, and I'm very specific to routine while remaining unreadable, if you will. Physics can tell us what light is, what wavelength ranges are involved, and how the eye and brain participate in color perception itself. It does not, though, however, on its own, demonstrate that a specific hue opens a measurable communication line to a planetary intelligence. Yet this does not make the contemplative use of color meaningless. It simply means that the strongest scientific claim available is psychological and physiological rather than supernatural. See, I myself like to view things from a scientific and a religious point of view. I bridge the gap. It is the Holy Trinity. God, science, religion, in my own view. The Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, which is God, science, religion. They are all one and the same. They are interchangeably. God gave me the intelligence to understand physics, and God gave me physics to understand religion, and mesh the two and interoperate all the above. Like this. It's a crossroads, if you will, represented by fate, destiny, things of that nature. God is a torch, represented by Hecate. You can intermingle all of the above. All is God, God is all. So it's not quite, what's the term I'm looking for? When you worship multiple gods. Polytheistic. It's not quite polytheistic. I lost my train of thought there. It's not quite polytheistic as a unification of all. It's like omnitheistic, more or less. Now, color, darkness, and attention ritual can reliably shape mood, focus, expectation, and symbolic salience, which is why in commercials they use like contrasted colors to draw on attention and make you feel a certain way internally, psychologically, without even being aware that you're feeling these things for the reason that they're projecting. You are unaware of this happening, but it is occurring on a subconscious level. This is where meditation enters the discussion. When a person sits in a darkened space, uses black to reduce external distractions, and introduces violet or purple as a visual focal point, usually when people doing ritualistic practices, they'll light a candle, they'll set an intention, they'll sit and they'll focus on the candle. That candle has a color, that color has an intention, that intention has an inner will that you are projecting out onto the quantum field. Several things happen at once here. On a physical level, the eye receives specific light information or reduced level light input. On a neurological level, attention narrows. On a physiological level, symbolic association intensifies. These conditions may be interpreted as making the inner self more receptive to the Saturnine qualities such as patience, restraint, discernment, sobriety, karmic review, and spiritual gravity. The scientific literature on meditation does support changes in attention regulation, though, emotional awareness, and stress response. Even if it does not validate all metaphysical interpretations people place upon those states, therefore a disciplined Saturn meditation can be described honestly in two separate languages simultaneously, also that runs parallel with Agiel and Zazel being two separate individual structural aspects of Saturn itself. In a scientific language, it is an intention and meaning practice that recruits color, darkness, breathing, and focused cognition to alter consciousness. In a spiritual language, it is an act of aligning with the intelligence and force associated with Saturn, whether named as Agiel, Zazel, Shani, Cronus, Saturnus, or another culturally rooted form. Now, earlier I referenced something I refer to as the quantum lattice. Now, the phrase quantum lattice field must also be handled carefully if this presentation is to remain intellectually sound, which is what I'm trying to convey here. While I do have my own personal views, I'm not trying to change anything, but I also want to project information that's scientifically accurate by textbook while cross-referencing and correlating supernatural phenomena and religious compounds all meshed together to create a super compound, if you will. Now, In mainstream physics, quantum field theory describes the behavior of fundamental particles and their interactions through fields such as electromagnetic fields. It does not provide evidence that human faith directly tunes consciousness into deity-specific frequencies in any laboratory-demonstrated sense. And I got to emphasize laboratory-demonstrated because there is also undocumented case study situations where things just happen and they're anomalous by nature, that there's just simply no explanation. It just is. It's one of those things that just is. There's no word for it. You can't describe it. It's the same thing as God, which all ties in together here. God is just something you can't really explain. It just is. It just is. However, the language of a quantum lattice field can still be used metaphorically to describe a contemplative model of reality in which mind, symbol, attention, and intention interact within a structured but subtle matrix of meaning. If one treats the quantum lattice not as a proven occult machine, but as a metaphor for a deeply interconnected field of information and potential, and again, I'm big on potential. Probability amplitude is a huge thing that I incorporate into my daily intention and will and amplification of my overall auric field and resonance field when I am just present. My presence is amplified based off my known potential that I perceive within thyself. Then the model becomes useful without being dishonest. In that model, faith functions as a stabilizing carrier wave, focus functions as a selective tuning, and inner guidance functions as interpretive output. What arrives to the practitioner is not best described as empirical data in the scientific sense, but as intuition. And this is where we need to be key here, because intuition is how this all plays out. You need to really hone in on your inner compass, if you will. Symbolic coherence, moral instruction, and contemplative insight. This process can be explained through an input-output analogy drawn from computing and controlling systems. The input consists of timing, symbolism, environment, and intention. Saturday observance, dim or black surroundings, violet or purple visual focus, prayer, breath discipline, names such as Agiel and Zazzle, Saturn, whatever, and a conscious thematic aim such as karmic review or the strengthening of boundaries. The processing layer includes attention regulation, emotional filtering, memory activation, archetypal association, bodily stillness, and ethical self-examination. The output here includes greater patience, stronger internal boundaries, a clearer tolerance for delay, improved long-range thinking, which means thinking way ahead of what one might be perceived to have the capability thereof, and acceptance of necessary endings, and a more mature relationship to duty and consequence. The feedback loop is going to be behavior. Because if the practice is sound, it should not merely produce interesting sensations. It should produce order, sobriety, truthfulness, ethical restraint, and wiser decision making. Otherwise, one has produced atmosphere without transformation. The deities associated with Saturn reinforce this dualism of severity and reward. Saturn and Kronos embodying time, structure, inheritance, and cycles of succession. Ops and Rhea bring the earthbound counterpart fertility, provision, storage, and the hidden abundance that follows rightful cultivation. In Hindu tradition, Shani intensifies the moral and karmic dimensions of the Saturn archetype, bringing lessons of hardship, delay, justice, and eventual correction. Across traditions, Saturn is rarely a force of immediate comfort. Its cons are heaviness, sorrow, fear, rigidity, scarcity, consciousness, isolation, and loss. Yet its benefits are equally profound. Maturity, endurance, clarity, reverence for law, moral seriousness, structure, and the ability to build what lasts. Saturn is therefore not merely punitive. Saturn is pedagogical. Its season can almost feel like Job's season. A period of stripping, testing, and apparent abandonment. Yet, within the larger symbolic cycle, that very season is often the precursor to durable harvest. The lesson is not that suffering is inherently holy, but that when limits are met with discipline rather than collapse, something incorruptible is forged. And this is the key aspect of drawing in the Saturn energies through the color contrast, pulling on those angstroms to alter your reality. You need to become incorruptibly forged. Don't sway one way because bad deal sounds lovely in the time being. Remember, all things are temporary. So that good idea now or that good offer now might only temporarily last. It might not be good for the long term. This is where the long range thinking aspect comes in, because when we are thinking long term, we can weigh things out, pros and cons, and make a more mature decision based off the potential consequences of whatever the situation may be. For that reason, to work with Saturn through color, prayer, contemplation, and sacred names is not simply to seek occult power. Although power is nice, power is also silent. It is to enter a field of seriousness. Now, purple in this context may be understood as the hue of hidden rulership, interior authority, sorrow transmuted into wisdom, and disciplined sovereignty, which is why I like to contrast purple and black every Saturday, or just do all purple, depending on how I'm feeling that week. It just all depends on my mood. Sometimes I go all black, sometimes I go all purple, sometimes I go all black and purple, sometimes I go purple and black. It just really depends on what my intention is that day. I'm very present day to day in what my intention is for that day. I don't think ahead unless it involves anything financial, family related, or anything that directly impacts my community around me. Otherwise, I am present in the day. I'm only worried about what I'm doing at that time. I have no concern for the past or the future. I am present. I am here. Now, not later, not before, now. Black becomes the womb of silence, the chamber of unmaking, the night in which excess dies and essential forms remains. Agiel can be approached as the ordering intelligence that teaches law, measure, and rightful structure. Zazel can be contemplated as a force that presses, tests, limits, and strips away illusions. Whether one interprets these as literal spiritual beings, symbolic interfaces, or personified energies of a contemplative psyche, the practical result is the same if the work is genuine. And when we're doing planetary work, or you're following the things that I am, you need to be genuine in your intention, because you cannot lie to these energies. You can't fake it. It's why people that use God as a mask, fake Christians, people of that type, always stumble and collapse under the weight of their own lie once observed, because the law of physics states anything observed collapses under its truth. Same thing for God. Same thing for these energies. If you are going to misappropriate and abuse these energies and not really embody how you're feeling, our output is going to reflect the input. So we are going to get out what we put in. That is what they mean when they say you get out what you put in. It's not just the effort that you're putting into something. It is how you are internalizing and feeling inside. You need to love yourself. You need to feel good to get good. You need to think abundant to get abundant. You need to feel loved by the Holy Ghost and the Holy Spirit and be filled by God to get the love of God and feel the love of God. It's in and out, and it's always balanced. It is never one over the other. Now, some people will argue that blind faith is unbalanced, and you're going to get one over the other. But that blind faith leads to a balanced outcome, because that input will reflect your outcome at some point. You will always get that which you seek in genuine interest. Now, one is going to emerge, though, I digress, less impulsive, less inflated, more exact, more ethically serious, and more prepared to carry abundance without being corrupted by it. And again, one must not be corrupted when doing the workings of planetary intelligences, spirits, and or frequencies or beings. That is imperative. What the synthesis ultimately proposes is not a proof that science verifies planetary magic, nor that religion must borrow prestige from physics to remain meaningful. Rather, it proposes that human beings live most deeply at the intersection of fact, meaning, and devotion. Science describes the light, religion and myth interpret the lesson, and meditation becomes the instrument through which those dimensions are made inwardly coherent. Saturn then ceases to be only a planet in the sky or only a god in old books. Saturn becomes a disciplined encounter with the law of maturation itself. It is an index within your own psyche that we use to catalog our own behaviors and forward momentum. The mystery that what confines us may also refine us, and you need to remember that. Sometimes we're being contained to be shaped and molded. It's like when we make chains or necklaces or something. After the crucible, the metal gets poured into a mold, and then it gets compressed into a shape, and then it's contained for a period of time until it holds and it's cooled and it matures, like the temperature is just right and all the elements are okay, and then you can take it off and then you can touch it and handle it and it's ready for the world. What delays us may also prepare us. Sometimes it's not a hard no. Sometimes you're just hitting delays because you need to learn something before you get what you want. Imagine if you got everything all you wanted at once in the current mentality. Realistically, could you handle it? Are you mentally prepared for it? Do you really seriously think you would be I don't want to say mature, responsible. Yes, we'll go with that. Responsible. Would you be responsible if you got everything you wanted with it right now? We're all going to screw around, F off slightly. But some people F off all the way because they're not mentally, emotionally, physically there for everything. And that what feels like winter may, under the right form of faith and focus, become the hidden architecture of our harvest. The crone's a cruel aspect of the fates. Terrible, but beautiful. It is one of those harsh lessons that you need to be flown up by the harpy's eagle and dropped, free falling from the air and fall to the ground. And that harsh lesson of I might die is going to be the crone. But landing in water is going to be the blind faith, because you still live to see another day, and you learned a lot in that minute you fell, if that makes sense. That's all I have for you guys today. Hopefully some of this makes sense, correlates, or resonates with some people. I am open for questions. I'll be making a few more videos like this to go over other planetary energies, but from a metaphysical and omni-theistic standpoint, this is where I'm at. Hopefully this clears up some of my perspective for some people that don't just quite understand, because some people have mixed views. They don't understand why I do the things that I do, and here's just a vague description of why I am the way I am. This is where my perspective is on reality, and the all is mental and the mental is all. Well, the all is God, so the God is mental, and our mental is God, so everything surrounds that. But I also like to know a rational and a logistical standpoint of that, so I need to know the mathematics, the science, the philosophy, the basis of being, and it all circles around religion because I was given the intelligence to think that. Therefore, I can actually compute that on paper and write it, because naturally as a human I need to label, I need to quantify, I need to understand. But I'm also the type of person that accepts things for the way they are. I don't question the unknown. I've had many of an experience in the abyss on my dark night of assault, but I can also directly correlate anything that I think and or perceive to a scientific-based fact or mathematical problem. So I have a direct correlation to my unknown and physical, which is my meta. So hopefully you guys found this entertaining. I'll see you in the next one.